When nothing matters, you stop fearing loss. And that's exactly where most people panic. Because when everything loses meaning, they crumble. But Machiavelli would smile. He understood something most never grasp. When the world becomes meaningless, power becomes pure, detached, precise, free from the illusions that make others weak. You see, the ordinary man needs meaning to function. He needs approval, purpose, validation, some external reason to keep him moving. But the Machiavellian man thrives when meaning disappears, because he understands that power doesn't need belief to exist. It only needs awareness. And when nothing matters, awareness becomes your only weapon. Most people misunderstand nihilism. They think it's despair, a void where nothing has value. But Machiavelli would have seen it as liberation. If life is stripped of meaning, if morality and emotion are revealed as tools rather than truths, then you're finally free to shape your own laws. The average person begs for structure, clings to values like comfort blankets. But the one who can stand in the chaos, untouched, becomes untouchable. Because when nothing matters, every choice becomes strategy. Every move becomes calculation. That's the paradox Machiavelli would have loved. The man who feels nothing wields everything. Because when others are guided by emotion, belief, or guilt, he's guided by observation. They hesitate to act because their conscience whispers. He moves because he sees no sacredness in hesitation. The world, to him, is a chessboard with no divine referee. And that's the core of finding power in nihilism. Learning to see reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Let's break that down. The first layer of Machiavellian nihilism is detachment. Not coldness for the sake of it, but precision born from clarity. Detachment means seeing people for what they are, not what they represent. When someone betrays you, you don't call it evil. You call it predictable. You stop asking, why would they do this? And start asking, what did I miss? It's not emotional withdrawal, it's strategic distance. Because the moment you assign meaning to betrayal, you lose your edge. The Machiavellian mind doesn't moralize, it measures. But detachment isn't apathy. Apathy paralyzes. Detachment empowers. The apathetic man does nothing because nothing matters. The Machiavellian acts because nothing matters. And that means everything is available. Every rule can be rewritten. Every system can be bent. When you realize the world doesn't reward morality but efficiency, you stop asking for fairness. You start learning the mechanics of influence. Think about it. If nothing has intrinsic value, then image becomes more powerful than truth. Appearances become the new currency. Machiavelli understood this centuries before modern psychology caught up. A ruler who looks just and kind doesn't have to be either, as long as people believe he is. The same applies to you. In a meaningless world, perception is reality. So you shape how you're seen. You decide the story others believe. That's how you turn emptiness into leverage. The second layer is acceptance, not passive, but tactical. The acceptance that people are driven by self-interest. That fairness is a myth. That loyalty often has an expiration date. Most people fight this truth, insisting on a moral universe that rewards good intentions. Machiavelli would call that a fantasy. When nothing matters, fairness dies, but clarity is born. You stop trying to change human nature and start using it. You don't get angry that someone is selfish. You calculate how to align their selfishness with your goals. This mindset doesn't make you cruel, it makes you adaptive. You become like water, shapeless, yet unstoppable. The nihilistic Machiavellian understands that meaning isn't found, it's assigned. If nothing matters by default, then you can decide what does. You become the architect of significance. You can make silence powerful, discipline sacred, solitude meaningful. Not because they inherently are, but because you choose to treat them as such. That's the ultimate reversal. The world's emptiness becomes your canvas. Most people don't see how much freedom that holds. They think nihilism means giving up. But for Machiavelli, It would mean letting go of delusions, of expectations, of the need for moral permission to act. When you no longer need to be good, you can finally be effective. When you no longer seek validation, you can finally be unpredictable. And unpredictability is power, because it confuses those still bound by rules. Here's a truth that's difficult to digest. When nothing matters, fear loses meaning too. What can the world take from a person who already believes everything is temporary? Reputation? You can rebuild it. Wealth? You can earn it again. Relationships? They fade anyway. Once you internalize that, your moves become fearless. You stop negotiating from insecurity and start from indifference. That's what terrifies manipulators. They can't guilt or shame someone who feels no emotional obligation to play their game. Now, imagine this mindset in practice. You enter a room full of people obsessed with appearances, the anxious, the envious, the attention-hungry. Everyone's performing, everyone's protecting their fragile image. And then there's you, calm, grounded, untethered from their little theater. You say little, you react less, because you're not performing for them. That absence of need gives you presence. They feel it, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't care to be liked, only to be effective. That's power through nihilism. And this isn't about being emotionless. It's about directing emotion like a weapon, instead of letting it leak like weakness. Machiavelli knew emotions could serve strategy if kept under control. Love, fear, guilt, they all have tactical use, but only when you're detached, enough to choose when to feel them. When you master nihilism, you don't suppress emotion, you own it. You wear it when it serves you and discard it when it doesn't. Here's the third layer, creation. Once detachment and acceptance dissolve illusion, creation becomes inevitable. If the old meanings are dead, you build new ones that serve your rise. That's how you transform nihilism from emptiness into empire. You no longer chase power to feel important. You use power to shape the world in your image. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in teaching how to dominate others, but how to see reality stripped of its sentiment and then re-engineer it to your advantage. Most of the world is stuck in reaction, reacting to pain, rejection, fear. They're enslaved to cause and effect, driven by emotions they never questioned. But the Machiavellian nihilist steps outside that chain. He understands that if life has no inherent script, he can write one. If morality is flexible, he can redefine it in his own favor. This isn't rebellion for the sake of it. It's order through independence. The only true authority is the one who no longer needs to be told what's right. When nothing matters, every moment becomes an experiment. You can fail, and it means nothing. You can risk everything and still win, because your worth isn't tied to the outcome. You stop seeing life as tragedy or comedy. It becomes a strategy. You live with intention, not because life demands it, but because power rewards it. That's what separates despair from dominance. Despair says, nothing matters, so why try? Dominance says, nothing matters, so why not? One surrenders to the void, the other commands it. Machiavelli would always choose the second path, because when the meaning collapses, only the strategist survives. Only the one who can look at the ruins of belief and see a playground for influence keeps climbing. And here's the twist most never expect. When you learn to live without meaning, meaning eventually returns on your terms. When you stop chasing purpose, you start embodying it. When you stop needing validation, people begin to seek yours. When you stop fearing loss, power starts following you, quietly, inevitably. Because the world bows to those who have nothing left to lose. That's what Machiavelli would have called the ultimate inversion, where the man who owns nothing becomes the one who cannot be owned, where nihilism, once seen as emptiness, becomes the foundation of absolute independence. When nothing matters, every move you make becomes art, because you're no longer acting out of desperation, you're designing out of clarity. And that's how you turn the void into a throne. There's a quiet danger in a person who no longer seeks meaning, not because they've given up, but because they've outgrown the need for it. That kind of person doesn't flinch when the world collapses. They adapt, they observe, they adjust their next move like a grandmaster who's already accepted that every piece, including themselves, is expendable if it serves the greater plan. That's what Machiavelli's power in nihilism truly represents, the transformation of indifference into strategic precision. Most people are enslaved by emotion, masquerading as morality. They'll say they're acting out of principle, but it's fear, fear of rejection, fear of guilt, fear of what others might think. The Machiavellian nihilist cuts through that illusion. He doesn't ask, "Is this right?" He asks, "Will this work?" That shift changes everything. Because when the noise of moral confusion fades, clarity begins to hum underneath. You start to see what truly drives people, not their words, not their excuses, but their hunger, their vanity, their fear of being forgotten. And in that insight lies power. This is why detachment, when fused with nihilism, creates an unshakable center. You stop being thrown around by the chaos of others, because you recognize that their chaos is just the noise of meaning-seeking minds. They need reasons. You need results. When you stop participating in their emotional theater, you rise above it. Suddenly, the manipulator loses his hold. The flatterer loses his leverage, because you no longer need anything they can give you. Here's where Machiavelli's thinking becomes lethal. Once you embrace that meaning is constructed, you can manufacture it for others. You can create illusions of significance to move people like pieces on a board. Politicians, leaders, influencers, they all do this instinctively. They feed people a sense of importance, direction, and belonging. That's why nihilism, when weaponized, doesn't look like emptiness. It looks like charisma, the power to make others believe in something you yourself know doesn't exist. You can see it everywhere. The leader who rallies a nation around a flag, the CEO who convinces his team their grind will change the world, the lover who makes someone feel like destiny brought them together. None of it's true, but it works, because humans crave meaning more than truth, and when you stop craving it, you gain control over those who still do. You become the silent architect of their illusions. But that's where the temptation grows dangerous. Nihilism can turn you into a ghost, alive, but unanchored, detached, but drifting. Machiavelli would warn you here, power without a direction is chaos. Once you've dismantled meaning, you must rebuild it consciously. Not because life needs meaning, but because your mind does. Even the strategist needs a compass, even if it's one he's forged himself. Without it, you lose discipline, and with it, your edge. So you give yourself meaning, but not the kind that chains you. A personal code, a vision, something fluid yet firm enough to guide your energy. Machiavelli's own code was simple: maintain control, protect perception, ensure survival. Yours might be to pursue mastery, influence, or quiet dominance. It doesn't matter what you choose, only that you choose. Because creation after destruction is how nihilism becomes power instead of decay. That's the final paradox. To find power in nothingness, you must first destroy illusion, then rebuild it intentionally. If you skip the second part, you sink into emptiness. But if you complete it, you rise beyond dependence. That's when your focus becomes razor sharp. You stop chasing external validation because you've realized it's just another illusion, and you start crafting impact like a sculptor shaping marble, aware that both the statue and the sculptor will eventually turn to dust, but doing it anyway, purely for the act of creation itself. That's the kind of mindset that terrifies people, because it can't be swayed. The person who embraces Machiavellian nihilism moves differently. They're not loud, but their silence carries gravity. They don't justify themselves, because they know explanations are for the insecure. They don't seek belonging, because belonging requires obedience. Their power isn't in dominance. It's in their refusal to be manipulated by meaning itself. When others play to win approval, they play to understand the rules. When others ask, "What's the right thing to do?" they ask, "What will get me closer to mastery?" This is the reason most never reach that level, because to stand in that emptiness, you must face yourself without illusion. You must strip away every identity you built to please others, every should, every must, every right thing. You must watch them burn and not flinch. And when the ashes settle, what remains is terrifyingly simple: your raw will, your instinct, your awareness. That's the foundation Machiavelli would have called true sovereignty. And it's from that sovereignty that real control begins, not over others, but over yourself. When you no longer need comfort, you stop being controlled by it. When you no longer fear rejection, people sense your independence and want your approval more. When you no longer cling to success, you make decisions without hesitation. It's ironic. The less you care about outcomes, the more outcomes you begin to control. Because carelessness is mistaken for confidence, and confidence is mistaken for power. And in this world, perception is often more valuable than truth. You start to notice something subtle too, a kind of calm that follows. While others rush to assign meaning to every moment, you observe. While they react, you plan. Their emotions become patterns. Your indifference becomes insight. You stop fighting for position and start shaping the battlefield itself. That's the Machiavellian essence of nihilism, where detachment becomes strategy and strategy becomes serenity. And maybe that's the quiet reward of it all. When nothing matters, you stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop suffering from what-ifs. You live deliberately, not because life demands purpose, but because you've realized that the act of choosing is the only purpose that ever mattered. You can smile in the void because you built your own light inside it. That's when you reach the rarest form of freedom, the ability to act without illusion, to love without attachment, to lead without needing to be followed. That's not apathy, that's mastery. And Machiavelli would tell you, in his quiet, ruthless way, once you reach that point, the world will finally bend, not because you forced it, but because you no longer needed it to.